LA Kings fans continue to talk possible trades. We reflect on Wayne Gretzky joining the Kings, coming off the anniversary of his trade to LA, and much more on another fan feedback edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. It is time for our weekly feature where we let you sound off on anything LA Kings related. It could be a topic we discussed on a show this past week. Maybe you have a question you want answered, or maybe you want to quiz the host. We will start with Go Big or Go Home Keith. He is still in parts unknown. He says, "Hey, Eddie, you've asked me when has it worked out for a team when trading their best player in their history. Wayne Gretzky to LA comes to mind. After Edmonton did that, they went on to win a Stanley Cup and advanced to the semifinals twice. Despite the Kings' slight improvements during the offseason, I don't think the Kings will make the 2027 playoffs. Besides, another main reason to consider is that there are several teams that'll likely be better next season, including San Jose and Chicago. Both are too promising to keep missing the playoffs forever. The Kings likely only made the playoffs by default last season because San Jose suffered a late season collapse. Winnipeg unexpectedly fell so badly, and Nashville only started playing well a tad too late in the season. The Kings need to get an established center like Matt Barzal. Yes, the Islanders should trade him, given that they are in dire need of a rebuild, and another top four pairing defenseman, and Carolina's Alex Nikishin, or getting back Vladislav Gavrikov from the Rangers would be perfect. You seem cynical of the trade proposals of myself and others for both those players. If you were Kings GM, what offers would you make that could make sense?" That was Go Big or Go Home, Keith. Well, first off, I believe I asked, or I said, you wanted to trade Anze Kopitar and Drew Doughty in their primes. And I said, I don't believe any team has ever traded two future Hall of Fame players that were, drafted by that team in their primes. So you mentioned Wayne Gretzky. That's one. So you need another player off the Oilers to be traded in their prime to justify, I guess, what you had proposed to do. Also, the Oilers didn't trade Wayne Gretzky as part of some kind of a retool. They were a very good team at the time. They traded Wayne Gretzky because their owner needed money. He had a lot of financial issues, and the Kings gave $15 million to the Oilers for Wayne Gretzky. Yes, there were players involved as well, but it was that cash that was the main reason why Wayne Gretzky was traded. And the Oilers, you were proposing that Doughty and Kopitar get traded in their primes after the Kings missed the playoffs a couple of seasons because you felt like that could restockpile the team. But the Oilers traded Gretzky for financial reasons. Yeah, they had success afterwards, but it wasn't because of the assets they got in return for Wayne Gretzky. They were a loaded team when they traded Wayne Gretzky with Mark Messier and Jari Kurri and all those guys, Paul Coffey. So that's why they were successful after that trade. And then a few years later, they started selling off all their players, and then they had a lot of years of not a lot. So that Gretzky trade didn't restockpile the Oilers and make them competitive and good for years to come. The reason they were successful after the Gretzky trade for a couple of years was because they were a loaded team. So anyway, there's that. As far as trade proposals for guys like Matt Barzal or Alexander Nikishin, as far as Barzal goes, I know you believe, I guess, that the Islanders are in dire need of a rebuild. Their general manager doesn't believe that, or at least publicly he doesn't believe that. And so he's not looking to get prospects and draft picks, which is what a team that typically is looking to rebuild is doing. If the Kings were to get Matt Barzal, they'd have to give up players like Quentin Byfield or Brant Clark, which they're not going to do, nor should they do. So there's no realistic trade the Kings can make to get Matthew Barzal. As for Alexander Nikishin, who's a defenseman for the Carolina Hurricanes, they want to trade Nikishin because they don't want to pay him. He's a restricted free agent. And they also want to get rid of the contract of a forward who's overpaid and underperforming in Jesperi Kotkaniemi, in addition to getting a player like, say, an Alex Laferriere. So it's a salary cap issue with that trade. I don't know that the Kings can re-sign Nikishin to a contract he's looking for, take on the contract of Jesperi Kotkaniemi, and make that work under the salary cap. So I don't know that there are any realistic trades that could be made for players like those guys that you mentioned. Gary in Orange checks in. He says, I wanted to respond to the ongoing debate regarding trading Anze Kopitar and Drew Doughty after the 2018 season. I've been watching sports for 40 years. I can't think of a situation where a team has traded a star player while in their prime, and mostly importantly, while they are still producing at an all-star level. The times when you see players traded in their prime, is when the team is under some pressure or duress because the player is a pending free agent and he won't resign, or if a player has asked to be traded like Dylan Larkin has. On a different note, I want to add that I loved your Gretzky video with Nick Nixon. It's probably my favorite Locked On Kings video this year. And that was from Gary in Orange. Well, I will say, Gary, Keith did bring up a good example of a player getting traded in his prime where he's still at a high level and also coming off a championship. Wayne Gretzky was that guy. So that did happen. But as you said, typically there are other reasons for that. Like I said, Gretzky was not traded because the Oilers owner thought, you know what, let's sell while he's got a ton of value and we'll restockpile the organization for years to come. That wasn't his motivation, number one. And number two, it didn't work. So there's that. I'm very pleased you enjoyed the Nick Nixon interview. Love having Nick on the show as much as possible. John in Phoenix checks in. He says, while some may say the problem was not trading Drew Doughty or Anze Kopitar, for me, I think the Kings hold on to mediocre talent for too long, forcing them to trade away talent before we ever get to see what they could do. I often wonder what would have happened if we just brought them in and forced them to sink or swim. For me, the list of prospects that were never given a chance to be great as a King, but actually became great contributors to other teams is sad. Sure, it's nice to have the bread man, but I would rather have seen Greentree as a King. Maybe you could do a show on the greatest Kings that never were. Keep doing the Lord's work, Eddie. That was John in Phoenix. I don't know if I'm doing the Lord's work here, but I'm giving you the hockey talk each and every day, pretty much here during the off season. So I'm not sure if John is saying that the Kings held on to mediocre talent. Like, are you talking about Drew Doughty and Anze Kopitar like at the ends of their careers? Again, there's reasons why players like that don't get traded. They're pillars of your franchise. They're, what they've done for your organization. The way that they are kind of ingrained into that organization's, the fabric of that organization, the relationship they have with fans. Those are the types of players, I'm more than happy seeing them end their career as LA Kings because of all they've done for the team. I'm fine with that as a Kings fan. As far as, getting Artemi Panarin rather than, seeing what Liam Greentree could do, it's why you have talent evaluators on your team. Now, they're not always right, but I think clearly, and I don't disagree with it, Artemi Panarin, like Liam Greentree, will likely never be what Artemi Panarin is now, even in the later stages of his career. So the question is, would you like an Artemi Panarin for 3 good years or a good Liam Greentree for, who knows, 6 or 7? I don't know. I would rather take the high-end player for a shorter period of time than a lesser player for a longer period of time. You can find good players. You have a hard time finding top-line forwards, and that's what Artemi Panarin is. So I get the argument, but like I said, I would prefer get the high-end player, even if it's for a short period of time, rather than just a good player for a longer period of time. I do like your idea of the greatest Kings that never were. I think that could be a feature that we do. I know the first name that pops in my head is Hall of Fame goaltender Billy Smith, who was drafted by the Kings, never played for LA, and ended up being either Hall of Fame or borderline Hall of Fame goaltender for the New York Islanders. He won 4 Stanley Cups, so I got to believe he's probably a Hall of Famer. Although I wouldn't bet my life on it at the moment. I wouldn't bet my life on many things, though, when it comes to sports. Keith in Culver City checks in. He says, thanks for doing this to help us hockey people through the summer. Getting the impression that Eric Gustafsson was brought in to be more than the Kings' seventh defenseman. Go Kings, go. And that was Keith in Culver City. Well, first off, thank you for supporting the show during the dog days of the off season. I think you could be right about Eric Gustafsson, who the Kings signed in the off season. There was not a lot of buzz around that move, but he's a left shot defensive defenseman who has a strong history of playing well under Peter Laviolette. He's played with him in a couple of different places before joining the Kings. But I will say, if he's not the seventh defenseman, then he's on the third pairing, maybe. That's as far as it goes for him. He's not getting a bigger role than that, in my opinion. All right, up next, Kings fans chime in on Wayne Gretzky coming to LA off the anniversary of that big trade. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Support for today's episode comes from Indeed Sponsored Jobs. When workplace chaos hits, you need the right hire. Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps connect employers with candidates who match specific needs like skills, certifications, and location. So less time gets spent searching and more time gets spent finding the right fit. People are finding quality hires on Indeed right now. And the minute that I'll be talking to you about this, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. One great addition can have a ripple effect on everyone around them. When you find someone who brings the right skills, attitude, and experience, it helps make the entire group better. That's why finding qualified candidates matters so much, and why tools like Indeed Sponsored Jobs can help make the process easier. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Less stress, less time, more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, that's a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? That's a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. All right, continuing our fan feedback show, Ryan in Moore Park checks in. He says it was awesome to see Nick Nixon on the show. Really heartwarming to see him doing so well in retirement and still going to Kings games. It was a great discussion. Curious what you think about the hometown remix mock-ups. And that was Ryan in Moore Park. He's talking about the new specialty jersey the Kings will have this season. Every team in the NHL is going to have one of these, as he referred to them, hometown remix jerseys. I've seen the leaks online. I've said it before. I'll repeat myself. I'm going to reserve final judgment until I see them in person. What I saw online, I'll be honest, it didn't blow me away. I thought it was okay. But like I said, I'm going to wait until I actually see it in person. But as you probably know if you've watched this show, I'm a jersey nerd, and I'm a total sucker for this kind of stuff. And teams know that people like me are going to buy their new stuff because I need to have the new thing, at least when it comes to a jersey. Michael Meng in Fullerton says, I was thrilled that you and Nick Nixon discussed the most important trade in Kings history and perhaps in NHL history. Thought it might be fun for all of us who love the Kings to suggest that you offer and even urge fans to send in their reminiscences of where they were the day Wayne Gretzky was traded from Edmonton to LA. I'll get the ball rolling by saying that it was a warm summer morning in early August. I was walking with my wife, Jan, in a lovely suburban community outside of Baltimore. I can still recall vividly pausing in the course of that walk to scan the headline of a Maryland newspaper. I was just stunned to the point of utter disbelief and shock by the bold type that announced to one and all that the Kings had acquired the Great One. Silence followed, and excitement filled my mind with the potential of something never dreamt possible that has come to be. As I reread the headline just to make sure I hadn't imposed my feelings onto a newspaper that didn't exist, keep on, Eddie. And that was Michael in Fullerton. Well, I wasn't a Kings fan when the Gretzky trade happened. When you're talking about my memories of that trade going down, I wasn't even really much of a hockey fan at the time, but I was a sports nut and considered myself a little bit of a know-it-all when it came to certain sports, football, baseball, basketball. I was intrigued by hockey, and I do remember hearing about the Great One joining at the time California's only NHL team and thinking, oh, that's interesting. And that sparked my interest in the Kings. It was a big reason why I started to follow the Kings and eventually became a big LA Kings fan. Frank in Ranchos Palos Verdes says, I want to try and keep this fairly brief as I could go on for pages as to why I and my fellow Kings fans at the time were and are still against Wayne Gretzky. First, most hated player from the most hated team. Would be like the Lakers getting Larry Bird in the 80s. You want to beat them, not align with them. Second, I know the NHL most definitely benefited from this move, but the Kings did not. Other than that great run to the finals, they had no significant playoff success. And after the failed run to the finals, the Edmontonization of the Kings started with the Kings acquiring old and not so good ex-Oilers, Charlie Huddy, Paul Coffey, Grant Fuhr, Yari Curry, to name a few. Gretzky was the de facto GM and essentially destroyed the team. And it took years and Dave Taylor as GM to restore some order. In the aftermath of getting the hated one of the Kings player, the Kings player talent and attendance hit rock bottom, and then he wanted out. And we got virtually nothing in return. The best memory I have of Gretzky is him sprawled on the ice in disbelief when the Kings tied the game in the final seconds of their greatest game, the miracle on Manchester, after Jim Fox picked his pocket and helped set up the tying goal. No to 99. Take care and go Kings go. And that was Frank in Ranchos Palos Verdes. Well, as I just said, I became a Kings fan because of Wayne Gretzky coming to LA, and I'm pretty sure I'm not alone. So I would hold off on saying nothing good came out of Wayne Gretzky joining LA, because I think there are a lot of fans who got into the LA Kings because of that fact. Now, they didn't end up winning a cup, but they did go to a Stanley Cup Finals. They became more of a relevant team, and the Kings before that really weren't much of a relevant team. They had their moments here and there. You mentioned the miracle on Manchester, but I don't know that I'm sitting here talking to you if Wayne Gretzky never comes to the LA Kings. I think that's probably true. Now, I don't know for sure, but like I said, one of the reasons why I'm a Kings fan is because Wayne Gretzky came to LA. Now, Frank, I know you're a bit older than me. I do remember there was a day where, players really did dislike other players, and players didn't jump around and join different teams too often. I mean, trades happen, but it's nothing like we see today. That era is long gone. So, look, if the Kings get Connor McDavid, the best player on the most hated team, it would be a little weird, but in the end, I'd be happy about it because I think he makes the Kings a better team. And in the end, that's all I really care about. So I respect your opinion, Frank. And I know you're not the only one who felt that way at the time, but I do think you would be hard pressed to find a lot of people that would say Wayne Gretzky coming to LA wasn't a good thing. Steve in Orlando, Czech City says, it's been a while since I wrote in, but I'm still an everydayer. Thank you, Steve. I just listened to your What If episode, and it got me thinking about a topic I kind of got obsessed with last summer. I heard a story about how Gretzky should have gone into the draft when the WHA was added to the NHL, but they made an exception for him. If not, he would have gone to the Colorado Rockies, who had the number one pick. I couldn't help but ponder what this would have done to the NHL and the Kings. What do you think this alternate universe NHL would look like? I have a theory and actually made it a reality on my PlayStation. In short, the Rockies would still exist. Edmonton would have collapsed by 82 or 83 and would have gone to New Jersey. After a few cups in Colorado, hockey in America would grow much sooner and into more Western and Midwestern states. I think Seattle would have been first with bringing back the totems. The North Stars and Whalers would have stayed put. No Ducks, no Sharks, no Panthers. What do you think? Would the Kings have survived the 80s? Thanks, Eddie, and go Kings go. And that was Steve in Orlando. Steve also included kind of a full NHL list of teams in his bizarro alternate NHL universe. So I don't really have time to get into all that, Steve, but I did read it, and I thank you for taking the time to do that. I don't think the NHL would be that much different if if Gretzky goes to Colorado instead of Edmonton. I think the whole Gretzky like, I think it's overblown to say that the NHL wouldn't have expanded eventually. Maybe it was a little bit sooner because of Gretzky, but I think we absolutely would still have had hockey in the Bay Area. I absolutely believe we would have hockey in Florida. Anaheim, maybe. I think that was more of a Disney thing than a Gretzky thing. And I also don't see any scenario where the Hartford Whalers are still in Hartford. And the North Stars moving, I mean, that didn't have anything to do with Wayne Gretzky. That was an owner who had issues and they wanted an arena and all that kind of stuff. I do, however, like your theory of the Oilers collapsing. It would be fun to think of what LA's playoff success might be like if the Edmonton Oilers did not exist, at least not exist, after the Gretzky era. Stephen Riverside said, after watching your podcast about what ifs with the Kings, I have some thoughts on the points you raised. Yes, in hindsight, the PLD trade that sent most notably Velarde to Winnipeg is a trade that set the Kings back a few years. From what I know of the details around that trade, supposedly it was a trade pushed by upper executives with the club, not Rob Blake. And supposedly, through the negotiation period with Velarde, sentiment had grown that he was not going to re-sign with the Kings, or at the very least, animosity had already bubbled up between the camps. As for the Faber-Fiala transaction, at the time, Fiala was the number one player available that offseason, and from what I've heard or read on a discussion board, Faber was not going to sign in LA after college due to having a family member with special needs that he wanted to be closer to home for in Minnesota. What truly makes this trade more egregious is the fact that Blake gave up a number one pick on top of Faber to Minnesota, when the Wild were in serious salary cap restraints and were never going to be able to re-sign Fiala. This was a pattern of Blake's tenure as GM, clearly overpaying in trade transactions. The second move that were the most troublesome in hindsight were the Ben Bishop, Eric Chernak trade. Supposedly Chernak wasn't going to sign in LA as well. And the move that really got the ball moving in the wrong direction for the franchise was exposing McNabb in the expansion draft over Forbort. You can also argue that giving that contract given to Cal Peterson that Blake rushed, another overpayment, was also a huge mistake that forced the Kings to make moves to try and correct that mistake, which led to them losing Matt Roy and Sean Walker. What really has hurt the franchise more directly has been poor drafting and prospect management. Yannetti and company haven't drafted a player of any significant impact since Kempe, going on 13 years now, and the team held on to certain prospects too long that clearly weren't NHL material: Turcotte, Fagemo, Jared Anderson-Dolan, Kaliev, Kupari. I personally feel that therein lies the real problem with the franchise: poor drafting and development versus trades that they've made. Praying the franchise guts the executive and scouting departments in the coming year and starts brand new. And that was Steve in Riverside. Well, Steve, I don't know that I never heard about any animosity between Velarde and the Kings front office. I'm not saying it's not possible, but I never heard that. I did hear those rumors about Brock Faber not wanting to sign in LA. Now, we'll never know, but he has said for the record that that was not true. I think what may have fueled the speculation was that Faber didn't sign with the Kings like right after they drafted him because he wanted to stay in college and try and win a national championship in Minnesota. So that may have been part of, he wanted to get another run at winning a national championship in his home state. And I think the Kings wanted him to sign and get in their organization, and he didn't. They were at odds there, but I don't know that meant he wasn't ever going to actually resign or sign with the Kings. The Eric Chernak trade was an awful trade. However, Eric Chernak actually was under contract with the Kings. They signed into a 3-year entry-level deal in 2015. So they traded him, but he was under contract. I would not disagree on the poor decisions surrounding Braden McNabb and the contract to Cal Peterson. I'm not personally as down on the Kings drafting as some are. I mean, 2019 was pretty brutal when you look back on it. I mean, the Kings did get Jordan Spence and Andre Lee later in the draft, but 4 players in the top 50 and the best you have to show for it is Alex Turcotte. That's pretty tough. But you said they haven't gotten any significant players in the draft since Kempe. I mean, Quentin Byfield is still a significant player. He may not be what a lot of Kings fans have wanted him to be, but he's still a significant player. I think Gabe Velarde was a top 10 pick who was a significant player, and I think Brant Clark is a top 10 pick who was a significant player. So, as I've said, drafting is a bit of a crapshoot. I don't think the Kings have been as bad as some people think. The Turcotte pick obviously has not worked out the way we have all liked. So that's certainly a miss. But anyway, so I'm going to look to keep my perfect record answering Kings trivia intact. I will try and do that next here on Locked In LA Kings, your team every day. Brian number 2 in Huntington Beach says, I recently watched a few YouTube videos discussing the potential disadvantages teams have, like the Kings, when competing for free agents because of California's higher state income tax. Got me wondering how significant this actually is when a player is choosing between LA and teams in states with virtually no income tax like Vegas, Florida, Tampa Bay, Dallas, or Nashville. Seems especially relevant in the NHL because of the hard salary cap. If the Kings have to offer a player more money to offset the difference in take-home pay, those extra dollars also eat into their limited cap space. Meanwhile, Nevada or Florida could potentially offer the same cap hit while leaving the player with more after-tax income. Over a long-term contract, that difference could amount to millions of dollars. Doesn't seem to be an issue with the Dodgers or Lakers because they just simply amplify the salary to offset this, whereas NHL contracts are small by comparison. Running this hypothetical on ChatGPT, a 7-year, $70 million contract yields $800,000 to $1 million more over the span of the contract between a Vegas deal and a Los Angeles deal. Do you think the NHL should ever consider some type of salary cap adjustment based on state or provincial tax differences, or is this simply one of the realities teams have to work around? Thanks for all you do. Go Kings, go. Brian number 2 in Huntington Beach. I've heard some people discuss this, that there needs to be something done to try and even the playing field regarding the no tax states. Obviously, Canadian teams are at a disadvantage as well, California, and some other states. I personally am not in favor of changing the rules. I think different teams have different things that make them unique. Could be geography, could be the tradition of their franchise. I think teams like the Kings just need to find more creative ways to overcome this. The reality is that this is a thing because of the Florida teams. The championships won of late from Tampa Bay and Florida has made this an issue. Players wanting to go there and play on winning teams. And yeah, the no state tax certainly is a factor in that. But I don't know that it's as big of a issue as it seems to be now anyway. And I also know the NHL has said they are not interested in doing anything to change this, to put in some special kind of rules to, even the playing field a bit. So the NHL is not interested in it. And frankly, I'm not really either. Steven Ventura says, I couldn't agree more with your on the projected timeline to make the NHL for some of our top prospects. Those time projections are insane. I'd be surprised if more than 2 of them are in the NHL by the 2027-28 season. Maybe one goalie could make the leap quickly, but that would be surprising by itself. Unless she, and he's talking about an author from NHL.com, is just saying they make their NHL debut, but like you said, it should be defined as playing regularly in the NHL, and that was Steve in Ventura. So Steve's talking about, if you didn't listen to that episode yet, possibly, Tracy Myers, NHL.com, listed the top 5 prospects for the LA Kings. And what I thought was the most interesting part of it was she had listed at the end of each player when they were projected to be in the NHL. And she had all 5 of the Kings prospects, Henry Bustevich, Carter George, Hamlet Slakinski, Kenny Connors, and Wojtek Shihar, all in the NHL by the season after next. And I would agree with Steve. I would put the over-under at Kings prospects on the team season after next at 2.5, and I would take the under. The odds always have to have half, right? So yeah, I thought that was a very, very optimistic assessment on her part. Lewis in Atlantic, Canada says, I previously emailed the podcast to discuss the lack of an announcement regarding Andre Kopitar's jersey retirement. Less than a week later, it's confirmed by the Kings for February of 2027. I'd like to think Philip Anschutz heard the episode and told his team executives to get it done. Maybe I'll get a shout out in Kopitar's speech. Just kidding. Hopefully Jonathan Quick's ceremony won't be far behind. And that was Lewis in Atlantic, Canada. Well, an old radio friend once told me, you never know who is listening. I'm pretty sure Philip Anschutz was not listening. I did see, by the way, I know there were some Kings fans who have been clamoring for this guy, Mark Walter, to buy the Kings. And I saw he just sold the Lakers, which was some big news here in town. And apparently he did it in like a year after buying the team. And there's a lot of scuttlebutt that he's got some big financial problems there. He's being like investigated by the federal government. So maybe best that guy does not buy the Kings. Brian number 1 in Huntington Beach says, you are 3 for 3 so far, my friend. Last week, I asked you to name a former King, and it was indeed Roman Vopat. You also correctly named his brother Jan Vopat. Very good. But can you name this former King? A right winger, drafted by the Washington Capitals in the 6th round of the 1988 NHL draft. He was traded to Los Angeles along with goalie Byron Defoe, a.k.a. Lord Byron, in 1995 for a 1st and 4th round pick. Over 2 seasons with the Kings, he scored a total of 46 goals and 120 points. He was named team MVP in both seasons with the Kings. In February 1997, this player was involved in an on-ice altercation with teammate Barry Potomsky during practice, where he suffered a partially torn retina. He was described by some, including former King Ray Ferraro, as selfish and a loner who often turned down offers to go to dinner with teammates. By August 1997, the Kings traded this player, along with Defoe, to Boston for Sandy Moger, Josef Stumpel, and a 4th-round draft pick. He wore number 8. Can you name this former King? And by the way, this week's episode, where you revisit past players' moves, had to be one of the most depressing Locked On episodes I've heard. To hear so many former Kings are thriving with other teams is tough to take. If Blake had just shown some patience and some faith in prospects, the Kings would probably be looking better today. It just goes to show that just because you're a Hall of Fame player doesn't mean you know how to build a championship team. Thanks for another great week of shows. Go Kings, go. Brian number 1 in Huntington Beach. Well, first off, I am very excited that I am 3 for 3, I think, in my trivia questions. So I hope to keep my perfect streak intact because I am a competitive fellow. So I will say the first name that popped in my head when you said a Washington Capital was traded to the LA Kings in the mid-90s was Dmitry Kristich. Now, I don't remember him being the MVP of the team for 2 years in a row. Doesn't mean he wasn't. I mean, those are some really forgettable years of LA Kings hockey. But you said he wore number 8. I'm almost positive Dmitry Kristich wore number 8. And I do think I remember him on the Boston Bruins too. So we'll see if I go for 4 for 4. I'm going to say the answer is Dmitry Kristich. All right, Ed and Brea snuck this one under the wire. I was getting ready to record, and suddenly I saw that I had a message in my mailbox. So Ed and Brea makes the show this week. He says, I hope this message finds you well. I would like to address some recent developments in the NHL that have caught my attention. Firstly, I want to confirm that the information regarding Jonathan Quick is purely speculative and should be treated as a rumor until further details are provided. Upon reviewing recent game footage, it appears that Carter George, Hampton Slakinski, and other promising players are likely to make their season debuts soon. In discussing goaltenders, it is worth noting that Yutaka Fukufuji made history as the first Japanese goalie to debut in the NHL with the Kings. While he was not the first player of Asian descent to join the Kings, his contributions to the team is significant. Additionally, there is a player from the 1993-94 season acquired from the Penguins in exchange for Tomas Sandstrom, who went on to have a notable career both on and off the ice. This individual played 18 games for the Kings before moving on to the Ottawa Senators during the shortened 94-95 season. Subsequently, he achieved success in lower leagues such as the IHL, winning the Turner Cup in 1999 before retiring in 2003. Following his playing career, he transitioned into coaching roles, notably serving as an assistant for the AHL's Grand Rapids Griffins for 9 seasons. Furthermore, he also contributed to international hockey, serving as head coach and official for his country's team during the 2014 and 2018 Olympic Games. While I have refrained from disclosing his nationality to add an element of the challenge, it is worth noting that he is the first Asian-born player in Kings history. I encourage you to continue your excellent work, and let's keep supporting the Kings together. Go Kings, go, Ed and Brea. I've read a lot of Ed and Bray emails. Is it me or was this one different? Did Ed and Bray really write this email? It was not worded as a typical Ed and Bray email. I don't know. My radar has gone up here. Something seems amiss. As for the Jonathan Quick information he's referring to, I don't know what he's talking about. Maybe I'm missing out on something. I don't think that Jonathan Quick being upset with the LA Kings is like, I mean, that's not really a secret, is it? I don't know. Maybe I don't know if he's referring to that or not. Okay. Okay, so this is a bigger challenge than any of the other questions I've been given, but I only know of one player to even answer this question. At first, I thought Ed and Brea was going down the Jamie Storr path. For people that might remember, Jamie Storr was a former LA Kings goalie, and he was half Japanese, although you wouldn't know it from looking at him, just saying. But he had, if you remember, he always had a Japanese flag on the back of his goalie helmet, and he always had like Japanese dragons or something, which was an homage to his heritage. So I thought that's where maybe Ed was going with his question, but obviously Jamie Storr was not born in Asia, which I believe he said was part of this player's story. Yeah, Asian born. He said he's the only Asian born NHL player for the LA Kings. You mentioned the Pittsburgh Penguins, and I do remember Jim Pack playing for the Penguins. I honestly don't remember him playing for the Kings, but I may have missed that. I believe Jim Pack won a Stanley Cup with Pittsburgh with Mario Lemieux and those guys, and he is Korean. So I'm going to say the answer to this question, because I honestly have no other player that even comes to mind. I think the player is Jim Pack from Korea. I believe that's my answer to the question. So we'll see if I get that one right. That was a challenge. All right. Thank you to everyone who took the time to email the show. This show is literally not possible without your participation. If you would like to contribute to a future fan feedback show, or if you'd like to just contact the show for any reason, the email address is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. You're always welcome to post your thoughts on each and every episode in the comment section if you are watching on YouTube. And we'd love you to stay connected with the show on social media, X, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. We are at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you as always for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network, your team every day. Have a great weekend. We will talk to you next time. And as always, go Kings, go.